Washington's defensive tackle depth is as deep as it's ever been. Lars and I break it all down right here on Locked On Huskies.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everydayers out there, thank you for tuning in to Locked On Huskies. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies of Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our work at si.com/college/Washington. You can also check out all our work right here on Locked On Huskies. Be sure to like, subscribe, leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever else. We are on all of those places, so make sure you listen to us. Today, we are going to be talking about Washington's defensive tackles. Yesterday, we talked about the edges. Today, we're going to talk about the defensive tackles. And Lars, to open up, I think we both have some pretty fun takes that we want to get out there. And, welcome to the show once again, as you are every day. I want to give you the floor here to start us off.
Yeah, so I think one of the themes in fall camp has been UW wanting to get some interior pressure and not just move the pocket, but actually have their defensive tackles be pass rushers effectively. So I think one of the key things I'm looking for this season is who is going to bring that pressure, who is going to get the sacks. Is it going to be Tuli Letuligasenoa getting 4 or 5 sacks to himself, or is it going to be the Parker brothers, Jayvon and Armon, combining for maybe 3 sacks and 2 sacks at some point, or kind of at some point maybe getting to that 5-sack total combined? It's going to be a really interesting way to see how the pressure breaks down.
See, I wanted to get a little bit more bold than you. I'm giving 5 sacks to one person, and I'm giving it to Faatui Tuitele. He's somebody who came in as such a highly regarded recruit, and you see it in flashes from him with certain moves. And obviously, he had the chest injury coming in. He struggled with some other injuries throughout his time here, and now that he looks like he's fully healthy, and something he said to us at practice a couple weeks ago is that this is as healthy as he's ever been. He feels just like a different person, just totally rejuvenated, and I think that he could get to 5 sacks individually this season. And this is a Husky defense that recorded 37 sacks last season. And really, most of it came from the edge rushers. Obviously, Braylon Trice had 10.5. Another 8.5 came from Jeremiah Martin. And it's something where we didn't really see a ton of interior pressure. Yeah, there were times where Jayvon Parker, as a true freshman, came through and was able to collapse the pocket and did a lot of really, really good things. But really, the numbers were not there from the interior. And I feel like Faatui Tuitele is somebody who we could really see break out as a pass rusher this year. But the guy that really all of this starts with is Tuli Letuligasenoa.
Yeah, and I think he's kind of been the one that's setting the edge, not setting the edge per se, but kind of setting the tone in the room of being a pass rusher. When I talked to him early in camp, that was his main focus in this offseason, was becoming that interior pass rusher, that dominant guy. And as the senior in the room, he's got to also not only set the example on the field, but he's got to help the younger guys, especially the Parker brothers being redshirt freshmen and Jayvon being a sophomore, to bring them along, because this is his last year in the program, if I'm not mistaken. I don't believe he has another year of COVID eligibility. But
I think he's used all of his extra years of eligibility at this point.
Maybe we got a Cam McCormick situation going on here in Washington. I'm not totally sure. But I think irregardless of that, you want to make sure that no matter what your seniors are doing, they're also having the younger guys learn, so that there's not that gap when we talk about later on in the show, moving forward, and kind of who are they going to be next year and years to come, because these are the guys. That Tuitele, I believe, does have one more year.
Yes.
Or Faatui does at least. But so I think what's going to be interesting to see is, does Tuli get the sacks or does Faatui? Because I think, to your point, it's going to be one or the other. And we know how Washington, we talked about it with the Edge show, how they're able to mix and match their defensive fronts to where you don't always have your edge rushers on the outside. You don't always have your interior guys on the inside. Actually, one guy that the more that I think about it is an intriguing candidate, because he's played a bit of both, is Jacob Andis. Jacob Andis is a guy that they've also had. I'm not sure. He's not a guy that will maybe get the sacks and get the TFL, but he's going to be the guy causing the pocket to collapse, which will allow a guy like Faatui or a guy like Tuli or even Trice or ZTF, all those guys, to get the sack. But he's just as crucial of a component as a Tuli or a Braylon on the edge.
Right. And I think it's I want to go back to your point about the Parker brothers combining 5 sacks, because I feel like we're definitely going to see more pressure this year. And the first thing I want to say is that if anyone's going to take on the double teams, it seems like it's going to be Tuli Letuligasenoa or MJ Ale, where they're the kind of guys who are going to take that and kind of let everybody else eat. kind of thing where, yeah, the numbers might not be there for them, but they kind of know what their role is for the most part. And that's something where, especially when we look at just kind of the different energy and the different tone that we saw that Jayvon Parker brought last year when he started off in the program. And I know we'll get to him and his brother a lot more in the next segment, which kind of speaks to just so much about this UW defense and just kind of the talent evaluation and everything that they do. But there's so much to just like with what we've seen from Jayvon and everything that, we heard from recruiting experts and even, to an extent from what the coaching staff has told us at the Alamo Bowl and just over the course of the season, is that they're really, really excited about everything that Armon Parker can bring to the table as well. And that he might even be better than his brother. So getting those two guys out there, especially at the same time, just because, not only does it torture people who don't know their numbers, which I think is really, really funny personally, but I think that there's just so much to like in both their games. And those are the kind of players that can make an impact here over the next 2 to 3 years.
You're absolutely right. And I think I remember going back to their recruitment. I believe it was actually Armon who caught Inoke Breckterfield's eye first on Twitter when he showed him his film. And I think it was like, again, that split second later where it's like, wait, who's the guy playing next to you? Oh, that's my twin brother. It's like, wait a minute, there's two of you guys? So I think Armon was kind of the one that pops off the screen. Jayvon's the one that's always been kind of the steady Eddie, consistent, like maybe the MJ All type, where you need a guy to still kind of take on those double teams and collapse, but also Armon's able to kind of actually then get through up the middle and vice versa. They can they're similar in ways. They are different. I think Jayvon is more naturally as a pass rusher, but I think Armon kind of fits that bigger mold to where he could be that stuffer. But at the same point, they're both athletic enough and agile enough to where they also truly can rush the passer. They're not just going to be two big bodies that you just kind of park on the defensive line and say, hey, stop the run. It's like these guys can also get after the pass rusher.
And that's a similar conversation that we can have about Tuitele as well, because he's somebody where even playing with a torn pectoral, I believe it was, that he played through in high school, that he displayed such an advanced arsenal of pass rush moves at a high school level. And he's just never really been able to fully prove it because of injuries, because of other factors. And now that it seems that all of those things are in his rearview mirror, that he's somebody who can just really, really make a bigger impact on the team this year, because I think that this, especially with what we've seen from the secondary, that there's going to be a lot of questions that need to be answered this year. And a better pass rush just helps everybody.
Well, exactly. And also knowing the fact that it can't just be the edge rushers, as we kind of said a little bit earlier, to where, yes, they had all the sacks last year, but that can't happen again this year, because when we saw times where teams are able to kind of run up the middle, and especially when I think what we're really kind of hitting on is the fact that you have to have that depth, because you mentioned Tuitele's injury history. Okay, well, you want to be able to get that guy plenty of reps, but also you don't want to leave him on the field too long, because if he kind of gets gassed in, let's say, the second or third quarter, now you got to play somebody else for an entire quarter. That's not exactly as advantageous. So I think it's a matter of also balancing out the reps that each guys are getting, because we've seen that in fall camp, right, where we'll look at the one defense, it's the one linebackers and the one secondary, but it's like a second string defensive line. And it's like, well, hang on. The reason why it's a second string line is because they're trying to see how can these guys get acclimated with the rest of the first team defense. And so I think that's a credit to Inoke and also Eric Schmidt on the edges, but it's specifically today, talking about Inoke Breckterfield's group on the defensive edge, in the defensive interior room. That's a real crucial component to where you always want to have multiple, but you probably want to have 6 deep. I think 3 at each position, 3 line changes right there, because you always want to be able to give each guy a breath. And also you want each guy to do a little bit different from a body type. You want each guy, maybe one guy's more of a run stuffer on third downs, sub him out, get the pass rush back in there. You want options is I think what we're driving at here.
No, absolutely. Now I got to remind everybody, this show is sponsored by Betterhelp. There are a lot of times in my life where I know I've felt really uncertain about everything that's going on, about what the right path was. Like, before I joined Sports Illustrated, I really wasn't sure about what I wanted to do, where I was going in my career. And, I've gone through a lot of therapy in my life. And sometimes in life, we're faced with tough choices, and the path forward isn't always clear. Whether you're dealing with decisions around career, relationships, or anything else, therapy helps you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life, so you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Trusting yourself to make decisions that align with your values is like anything. The more you practice, the easier it gets. If you've benefited from therapy, like I have, I would really recommend BetterHelp. It's really helpful for positive coping skills, how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It isn't just for those who've experienced major trauma in your life. if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. Therapy has helped me. I'm sure it would help other people as well. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedoncollege. All right. Now, we talked a little bit about him in the first segment. We might have even, just kind of overemphasized the point, but we really, really need to continue to hit on just what the Parker twins have been able to do since their arrival. Jayvon was the only freshman, I believe. Javion Green did as well, to burn his red shirt in 2022. And he was just somebody who really, really impressed every single time he was on the field. And there's so much that you could talk about the talent evaluation that Inoke Breckterfield had to do to, go out and find these guys, which, props to him for looking through all those replies on Twitter. Respect. It's really hard to do sometimes, especially with certain things that people might post, like when I post about the Red Sox, for instance. But it's something where this coaching staff has done such a great job at identifying talent at so many different positions. But if this team really wants to compete for what now we can continue to say a Big Ten championship year in and year out, the defensive line is going to be crucial for that. And finding guys like the Parker twins is really, really helpful to do that. And I think that the fact that they were able to go out and do that in their first year of just being inside the program it just speaks to what might be next for this coaching staff.
Well, I mean, to your point, it wasn't even the first year; it was the first 2 months. It was
right away.
Because that's how crucial that they were, is because they didn't take any other. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but they didn't take any pure interior defensive line transfers since the Parker brothers committed to Washington.
That's correct.
So I think that's a big crucial year in terms of, okay, well, how do we want to supplement this room? No, both of these guys are on track to be stalwarts up the middle. And if you can kind of go through a class and say, hey, we hit on both of them, we maybe don't need to go to the portal because we have plenty of depth at the position of the guys that, again, we'll talk about it later in the third segment about the recruiting in this class. That's why they've been able to target certain guys in this class, because the Parker brothers have proven, even though Armon was hurt for all of last season, he was able to work himself back. I remember him doing some stretching and conditioning drills at the Alamo practices because they didn't want to rush him back. It was clear he probably could have played last year, but there was no need to rush him back because they have the bodies that last year and this year, but they need the bodies this year and next year, the year beyond that. So I think we can't undersell how crucial that get was, because it solved an entire problem for over a year for them.
Right. And I think that not only can we talk about what the Parker brothers have done since they got here, but I think we can also just kind of talk about some of the guys that Inoke Breckterfield has really helped kind of bring to light. And the main person, you mentioned him a little bit, just very briefly in the first segment, is Jacob Bandes. Jacob Bandes is a guy who really, really struggled when Jimmy Lakestaff was around. And just, even though he was a top 150 recruit in the nation, he never really got going in the way that people thought that he would. He was a really good pass rusher in high school. And yeah, pass rushing in high school versus college is a very different conversation, but there were never any steps. You never watched Jacob Bandes in 2021 and just said, oh yeah, I could, this is a nice move. Oh, he did something really, really promising here, and this could translate towards future success. You never saw that. And in 2022, when he started getting into the rotation, it was like, oh, wait, who's 55? Oh, wait, that's Jacob Bandes. Look at what he's doing. He's really he's leaned out a little bit. He's become more athletic. Just the motor is back, because that was something that he played with in high school, was a really, really high motor. And then you didn't really see that during his first real stint in Washington. And now that, with whatever it is that Inoke is kind of taught these guys on a daily basis, it's really resonated. And Bandes's development has helped make this room a whole lot deeper. And it kind of speaks to what he's doing with the Parker twins, what he's been able to do with MJ Ale and his transition to the defensive line. And even Tuli has gotten better, and Faatui Tuitele has learned way more about, playing the run. And now that, and like I said earlier, his pass rush games should come along as well. But there's just so much to like about this room going forward. And I think that, if we were kind of talking about coaches that you had the most faith in to develop a certain player, I would put Inoke much higher on this list than I feel like some fans would give him credit for.
I mean, I think no disrespect to the rest of the staff, but if you look at what he's done, both track record and kind of the impact that he's had at Washington, outside of Eric Schmidt, he's number one on that defensive staff in terms of, because I think, again, the key here is the way we look at Washington's front is how is it set up? Because yes, the edges had all the production last year, but that wasn't because the interior couldn't get the job done. It's like the interior was plugging the holes so the edges could get after it. So I think that's kind of why the front seven's always not been an issue for Washington. Ironically, it's just been the back half. And I think, this year, to our point, you can solve a lot of back end problems by getting to the quarterback, rushing and making him throw. I mean, look, that's what they did the first 4 weeks of the season when they got 2 picks against Kent State. And yes, we can talk about the level of competition that was, but that's also when the scheme was hitting differently. I asked Celestine, again, not to get into the defensive backs, but did defenses start attacking you differently? Because I think it's fair to say defenses started realizing, hey, Washington's got a solid front seven. Let's just try and do quicker things, get the ball out to get rid of that pass rush. And that actually kind of worked in the middle part of the season. Yes, they were able to hang on and get most of the wins and still finish 11-2 overall. But I think this season, if you can get more interior pass rush, that's going to make the linebackers and safeties have a lot better job.
No, that's a really good point. There's just because so much of this starts from the defensive tackles. And it's not just, we've talked a lot about them as pass rushers, but the whole run game. If those guys are moved up their spot right away, the run's probably going for 4 or 5 yards anyways. And this is something where, there were times last year where just everybody struggled in run defense because I feel like there was so much extra committed to, teams are throwing the ball all over us. Like the Oregon State game is one that I can think of where, Oregon State runs the ball as well as anybody does. Just ask Oregon and the 19 straight runs, but we don't have to get too much into that on this podcast. But I had to get one little jab in there. But no, it's they've become such a stout group as run defenders. And I feel like there's no better 2 guys for that to watch this year than Ale and Tuli.
Yeah, and almost, and if you think about it, go back to when Washington's early success under the Chris Peterson and late Steve Sarkisian era was Danny Sheldon and Haloi Kigaha. So you had one big, that's kind of the Tuli and Trice. It's that same sort of recipe and the key for Washington is they have more than just those 2. And I think that's kind of what's always set Washington back in the past is, yes, you had one dominant pass rusher, but there was never that second guy, never that third guy. And I think, ironically, going back to Bandages for a little bit, Bandages is the guy, since he can do both, I think that allows the defense to be a little more versatile, and thus everybody else has success. He might not get the credit for it, publicly, and it's not going to show up in the stat book. But if he can take on 2 defenders, or Tuli can take on 2 defenders, then that means Faatui, Zion, and Braylon can eat. Even the linebackers can start eating at that point.
No, that's a really great point. And I feel like it's a really solid idea to bet on Washington's defensive tackles this year. Just like you can do a lot of great betting on FanDuel. Football season is about to kick off, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to win all season long. Because right now, when you bet on a Super Bowl winner, you can get bonus bets every time they win in the regular season. Just pick any team to win the Super Bowl, and you'll get bonus bets for every victory. You can use your bonus bets on spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and start earning bonus bets with America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Now, I'd definitely recommend taking the Bengals at +1,000 in the Super Bowl so you can get those bonus bets. I feel like that's a really good idea. Just highly recommend that. Also, Jalen Hurts +1,200 to win MVP. I think that's a pretty solid bet to throw out there. Nick Bosa +1,200 for Defensive Player of the Year. And then my big long shot is just big bounce back player this year. Mac Jones +20,000 to win Offensive Player of the Year. Go Pats. Got to throw that one in there. All right, let's talk about the rest of this room here, because one guy we really didn't get a chance to touch on is true freshman Alenius Davis. We haven't seen a ton from him. He's still recovering from a knee injury he suffered in high school, and the coaching staff is definitely, they're easing him in. It's a little bit on the lighter side, and I think that he's a really promising player when you look at his film. He's definitely the kind of guy who you watch his film in high school, and he's playing against a lot of smaller competition, and he was able to kind of be a game wrecker. He was able to just use his power and was really hard to move off in the run game. So, and that's something that I think is going to be the quickest translation for him when he does see the field at the college level, is he's going to be a really, really stout run defender, but he's going to have to learn how to utilize his power against, bigger, heavier guards as he plays in the Big Ten. Yeah, I have to say it again. I have to put the emphasis on that because I'm still getting it through my own head that that's something that's happening. But it's something where, as he develops moves as a pass rusher, I think he's a really promising player.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big deal. First of all, he's going to be a big deal, right? Is that where we're going with this? No,
I like that. That's a good one.
but I will say, I mean, I think in the limited time that we have gotten to watch, mainly, I think it's been about the last week and a half of practice that he was starting to get more in. It's like, hey, he doesn't have the brace on his knee anymore. He's able to kind of start doing some things. But again, getting back to this whole point of the depth, they don't have to rush him along. They don't have to force him into just, hey, now that you're healthy, we got to get you on the field. If for some reason he does get on the field, that's either a good thing because they just want to see how we can do, kind of like how the Jayvon Parker got the sack against Washington State last year. And hey, late in the season, let's see how you do, sort of thing. That's the ideal path for him. The concerning path would be if he's having to play early October because that means the depth is going to take a hit. But I do think Elenius is going to make a key impact. And also, I think he's a good mix for what they have coming in the room in this 2024 class. I'm sure I want you to touch on that in a bit. But just I think the combination of what he brings and then what the three guys coming in bring, it's a perfect kind of combination to where, again, going back to what I said earlier, you don't have to go into the portal because they are finding the right guys that fit this defensive front. And that's a credit to Inoke Breckterfield.
Yeah, because I do want to touch on recruits for a minute. There are only two right now. And, we'll talk about the third, who's currently uncommitted, but has Washington in his top 4. Everybody knows what I'm talking about, so I'm just gonna wait an extra minute. I also want to remind everybody to make sure you tune in tomorrow when we are going to be discussing the linebackers. There's so much to like with the linebackers this year. I think that they're primed for a major jump forward, especially with a healthy NF1 Ulfocio. But we'll get to that tomorrow, so make sure you tune in for that. The first guy that I want to talk about is Omar Khan. Yeah, you didn't think I was going to start there, did you? But no, Omar Khan's a really promising player from Texas. He's one of those guys where you always like just seeing a wrestler's background. And he's the kind of dude where, no, he doesn't really collapse the pocket the whole time. He can at times, but he's just such a strong player. He's really hard to move. And it's a lot of the things that I said about Elenius Davis seem to be very true about Omar Khan. It's a guy where, we see why this guy has 19 offers. Like he's a low 3-star, but he had 19 offers, and a lot of teams were pursuing him. And I think that Washington had that was a big time win compared to where the other defensive tackle that recruit right now that's currently committed is Ratumana Bulabalavu, where he's just a super explosive dude. Where he kind of reminds me a lot of what Voit Tanufi's film is, where he's a little bit lighter, playing a lot on the interior, but he's the kind of guy who can get up to he's got a different frame than Voit, where he can get up to 285, 290 pounds and still make a huge impact on the interior of the line because he has a first step that reminds me of Levi Onwuzurike's. It's so quick. He's so fast off the line. He can get in the backfield in a flash. And just between those two guys, and I'll let you talk about Jericho Johnson and everything that, could come along with that. But this is already a really solid defensive line class, but Jericho Johnson is the kind of guy who can really take it over the top.
Yeah, Jericho is kind of what Shaq Thompson was back in the day, where not at the position, but the impact that he can have, where he's the cherry on top, where you've got all the bodies that you need, but when you have the chance to take one of the premier interior defensive tackles in the country, you take it. And they're right there with USC and a couple of other schools right now for his recruitment. I think he's down to 4 schools now. But in my opinion, I've kind of heard that it's really USC or Washington. And he's kept his recruitment open to his credit. And I think I don't know how much of an impact a single game can have. But if Washington's able to go down to the Coliseum and beat USC in LA, I think that could be a major statement to Jericho to say, hey, wait a minute, we saw it last year. Saw it again this year, and they're both going to the Big Ten. So either way, I'm going to be a Big Ten player. I think if Washington can beat USC out for Jericho Johnson, that's going to be a major statement for Kalen Moore because the one thing the staff hasn't had, they had good recruiting wins, certainly, and it's even with a couple of defensive linemen, but I think it's kind of hard to look at a statement aside from maybe Caleb Presley, and I'm not even sure that Jericho would be a bigger statement without question than Caleb Presley.
Oh, no, absolutely. No offense to Caleb Presley, but taking a guy who really is a top 100 overall player out of California when He kind of, and one of the things that was really shocking about his top 4 announcement was that he spurned Alabama. He spurned Georgia, who I'm sure were truly heavily recruiting him, trying to say, hey, come out to the SEC, take an official here. And it does feel like he only is going to take an official to USC in the fall. Like I'm sure Oregon is going to push and they might get one, but I don't know. It's 50-50 for me. And I've heard similar things that it's either USC or Washington, and there really is a good chance, especially if he comes out at any point this fall for an unofficial visit on a game week. I think that the Huskies could win out this recruitment.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know what his high school schedule is, but I wouldn't be surprised if maybe he tries to get it for the Oregon game, because I think that'll kind of set the tone. That way he'll go. He might. The crazy thing could be he could take his official to USC for the Washington game, and that could just call it. Then you just call it a wrap right there. Now, I think to his credit, he's kept it open. I think that's kind of we had heard, both of us, I know, had heard rumblings that he was close to Washington, that I had heard he was actually close to USC. And then I think he kind of took about a 2 or 3 week break and just said, hang on, let me take a step back. Obviously, these are the schools that I want. USC and Washington are absolutely in play, but I don't think I'm necessarily ready to make a decision. And Kalen hasn't continued the Chris Peterson method of necessarily, hey, like, we want you to commit, like now and then you're in the boat. But he's also kept the tradition of, hey, no need to rush. We would rather have you commit somewhere else because we're going to still keep recruiting you, or we don't want you to commit to us and then have to back off your decision. And so I think that's actually been a credit to Washington. And what's kept USC and Washington kind of right there is neither of them have pushed. They're both pushing for his commitment, but neither of them are saying, hey, you have to commit to us by this time. I think that's a credit to both the staffs, and especially Washington, because going toe-to-toe with USC is not something they've done in the past. And the fact that they flipped Tuli, Letuligasenoa, but that was more or less kind of a USC was okay to see that one go. This one would be, if you can beat USC for them, they're not going to be happy about it.
No, that's absolutely right. And, I kind of want to take a minute to just kind of look ahead and talk about the future of this room, because after this year, both MJ Ale and Tuli Letuligasenoa are out of eligibility. So I think that we are going to see a very deep rotation from this room anyways this year, but I think that we're also going to see just a whole heavy dose of Tuli and Ale next to each other, because those are the kind of guys who can just set the tone, set the tempo, and then you can bring in the Parkers right next to each other, or Tuitele and Bandis right next to each other, or any combination of these 6 guys can have an impact in some way. And of course, taking 2 leaders, 2 seniors out of that room always hurts. But I think that just with the way that Kalen DeBoer's staff has, and I know I keep hitting this point over and over again of evaluating talent, the way that they're able to do that, and the guys that they've been able to bring in, I do think that they might have to hit the transfer portal for just one impact guy this year, or maybe it's just a guy who, we just want him to clog the lanes and stop the run. I think that's very possible this offseason, but I think that just the way that the staff has evaluated talent and filled out the room in a way that Jimmy Lake's staff really didn't is just more and more of a testament to what these guys are trying to build here, and what really in just a year and a half they've done a really great job of building.
Yeah, I think the way that I can see them going into the portal is if they don't get Jericho Johnson. I think that they're absolutely going to go in the portal. I think Jericho kind of could fill that void if he's able to commit and doesn't choose USC. I think that would be a way where Washington wouldn't have to dip in the portal. I do agree, maybe from a depth perspective, they might just want to add one extra body, but I think the extra body would come more from Jericho, because I think Jericho is a guy that you can get a chance to certainly play next year. If he comes into Washington, he's absolutely going to push for playing time next year.
He'll push for playing time, but is that someone where, think about this from the perspective of the staff, would you really want to burn that red shirt right away? And instead of just, depending on, of course, if he comes in and blows everybody away, and let's say he enrolls early, does that in the spring, does it again in the fall, of course, yeah, sure, go for it. Mm-hmm. But if you want to just be a little cautious, why not take that extra body either way? And it's something where then, there would be 6, maybe 7, I'm probably doing my math wrong here, bodies at the position, and why not just have the depth? Why not just say, we're going to let this guy develop. Yeah, we'll use him in spots. We'll get him in his 4 games. He'll play in the bowl game as well. But why not just, be a little bit patient with that?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. But I think that's the point that we're getting at. That's a good situation to have. You either get an elite 4-star top 100 player in the country, or you get a decent player out of the portal, because they've shown that they can get guys, especially on defense, out of the portal. Like Jabbar Muhammad, a few other guys, Raylan Goforth, Zach Durfee, a few other guys. I think they certainly can go evaluate the portal just as well as they evaluate talent from high school. So I think either way, you're in a good spot.
Lars, I want to thank you for being here with me today. Thank you to all you everydayers out there for listening. Be sure you tune in tomorrow when we are going to talk about the linebackers. And please make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get it. Follow both of us on Twitter. Check out all our other work at si.com/college/Washington for Inside the Huskies. And thank you all so much for being here. Leave a comment, leave us a review, 5 stars, please. We really appreciate it. We'll talk to you all tomorrow.